Hello and welcome to episode 37 of the Wisdom from the Akasha podcast. My name is Susie. I am your host and I am an Akashic Records teacher and practitioner. Today, I want to talk to you all about shadow work and give you some very generic tips on how to help support you through your shadow work. Obviously, everybody is completely individual and unique, so these are going to be very generic, but I do hope that they give you some guidance for when you are doing your own shadow work. The reason that I have chosen shadow work as today's topic is I'm recording this in October. We are coming into the season where the divine feminine energy that is within us all, regardless of gender, is very dominant. And shadow work is a theme that is very connected to that internal divine feminine energy. People can sometimes want to avoid or bypass their shadow work, which is not something that we can ultimately do. It's going to come back around, no matter how much you try to repress or avoid it. Or on the other extreme, some people will try to force their shadow work. And I want to talk a little bit about this in detail today so that you can deal with your shadow work as and when the opportunity presents itself. Shadow work is a term that was coined by the psychologist Carl Jung back in the early 1900s. Before that, in the scientific community, there wasn't much acknowledgement in respect of the subconscious or the unconscious. Of course, within esoteric schools and within mystery schools, within spiritual traditions, there's always been this understanding of this shadow part of ourselves. But Carl Jung really brought it into the mainstream scientific community. And it's this understanding that we repress certain parts of ourselves throughout our lifetime and we repress it into our subconscious. We must always remember that energy can never be created or destroyed. If we have, for example, anger rise within us, that anger is a form of energy. And if we don't allow ourselves to feel it, if we don't allow ourselves to transmute it and we repress it, it doesn't disappear. It's still within us somewhere. We would say in the Akashic Records, it's still within our light grid. So there was this understanding that throughout our lifetime, often due to traumas and experiences within childhood, we go through our lifetime repressing parts of ourselves. At the time of your birth into this incarnation, you're the closest to your higher self that you will be in that incarnation until you go through your spiritual awakening and you do your work. Okay, you've come into the incarnation as this individualized fractal of the soul manifested into physical reality. And then that experience of going through your toddler years, your childhood years, your teenage years, that is when you are programmed and conditioned by your parents, your society, your teachers. And during that programming conditioning experience, what happens is you learn that certain parts of you are acceptable depending upon what the society and parental unit says is acceptable, and certain parts of you are unacceptable. And what happens is we accept certain parts of ourselves and we reject certain parts of ourselves. The shadow work is coming to understand, acknowledge, reintegrate those parts of ourselves that we have rejected during that process. Now, you can, of course, reject parts of yourself throughout your entire lifetime, but the majority of this rejection happens during childhood and during teenage years when we're learning how to operate within the world. During the spiritual awakening and development experience, what usually happens is someone will have a spiritual or mystical experience. They will have this huge expansion of consciousness, and this will last for a certain period of time. For some people, it's a couple of hours. For some people, it can be weeks or months where you're feeling oneness, you're feeling your connection to divinity, you're feeling complete unconditional love for everybody around you. And then at a certain point, what will happen is you will drop back down in consciousness level to your resonant frequency. Your resonant frequency is where you are at from an energetic perspective. This resonant frequency or level of consciousness, whatever you want to call it, is based upon that unique frequency of the soul of which you are the material manifestation of, and also all of the stuff that you have collected throughout your lifetime. So your soul is extremely high vibrational. You do not need to raise the vibration of your soul. What you're doing on your spiritual journey is you're letting go of all the stuff that is stopping you from being connected to the soul, stuff which you have experienced, stuff which you have repressed, stuff which you are attached to and you are holding on to, that take you away from this internal spark, if you like. Raising your frequency is about transmuting all of that stuff that you have collected or attached to along the way and connecting back into that divine spark. It's less about doing certain things that can temporarily raise your level of consciousness, and it's more about utilizing those practices that you have learned to deal with the stuff as and when it comes up, to transmute that lower aspect, that egoic aspect of yourself, into the highest version of yourself, which is in alignment to your soul. So you've had this beautiful higher consciousness, higher frequency experience. You've been in that state, and then you come back to reality. And sometimes you can feel like you come back to reality with a little bit of a bang, because that experience of that higher level of consciousness has changed you energetically. We can see this change in the light grid from the Akashic Records perspective. And so what happens is when you come back into your reality of your resonant frequency, you're back to where you were, but it's with a new perspective, with a new fresh pair of eyes. And this is when people will experience what's called the dark night of the soul in the spiritual awakening journey. It's that, oh, I've got all of this stuff that I haven't dealt with. I've got this trauma that I've experienced that I need to work through. I've got these patterns and I've been programmed and I've been conditioned and I need to deprogram and decondition. It can feel very, very overwhelming. But it's during this dark night of the soul that we really start to see shadow work coming up and the opportunity that shadow work presents to reintegrate those parts of ourselves that we have repressed. As I stated earlier, shadow work is very connected to the divine feminine energy because it's an internal process, and the divine feminine energy is the going within aspect. It's not the up and out spiritualization or masculine, internal divine masculine energy that we also have. It's the going inwards and it's going into the depths of our being. Shadow work is also really associated with our sacral chakra, which is the first of the primary chakras to be divine feminine energy dominant. And the sacral chakra is the home of the unconscious. It's the home of everything that we have repressed. It's our first emotional center. And it's also the center of our sexual energy, our creative energy. Doing shadow work can be very uncomfortable because not only does it require that going in and really self-reflecting and unpeeling the layers of the never-ending onion, it also requires us to get really honest with ourselves about what is coming up from that center. From an archetypal perspective, when you are doing your shadow work, you often feel a strong connection to the dark goddess archetype within you, because the dark goddess aspect of the feminine is really about clearing out and letting go everything that is no longer in alignment. This aspect of the divine feminine energy has been repressed throughout our society. It's been shunned, it's been demonized, but actually everything that that dark goddess asks us to do is from a place of complete unconditional love. She wants to help you get rid of all of this stuff so that you can live in alignment, so that you can move away from the pain and the suffering of being attached to certain things that no longer serve you and that are out of alignment to you. Also, because of this connection between shadow work and it being this divine feminine energy dominant work, we have to remember that it is cyclical. Divine feminine energy works on a cycle, and we cannot go prodding around for this to come up if it isn't time. Life is always going to present you with everything you need in respect of your spiritual journey. Your spiritual journey is not supposed to be, I'm going to go off and do an hour of meditation, and then I'm going to go back into my life and I'm going to act unconsciously. Your spiritual practice is supposed to support your everyday life, and it's supposed to help you approach your everyday life from the perspective of life being your guru, life being your teacher, and paying attention to what comes up around you so that you can then take that into your spiritual practice and deal with what is coming up. We have to pay attention to our life, our surroundings, what is going on with us, what's coming up for us internally based on what we're seeing in the external, and take the opportunity to do the shadow work as and when it arises. Unfortunately, you can't schedule, okay, on the 25th of October, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to do my shadow work. It doesn't work like that. So always bear that in mind. If it's time for you to do some shadow work, that's great. I hope these tips will help. If shadow work isn't something that's coming up for you, that's completely okay. You can revisit this episode when you do feel that this work is coming forward for you to do. I also want to mention here that doing your shadow work and experiencing dark night of the soul, you're going to experience more than one on your spiritual journey. I don't ever want anyone to feel disheartened or that they've gone backwards if they're experiencing certain issues again or certain things are coming up. We have to always remember that this expansion process, we go round in a spiral. And if you're hitting certain issues again, please don't see it as a backwards move. Please see it as you're going deeper into the wounding. I know it can be frustrating and it can be disappointing if you're having to revisit certain aspects that you feel like you've already dealt with. But I promise it's never a backwards move. It's always a revisitation so that you can go deeper with a certain issue. Something that can occur during childhood, teenage years, even into adulthood, and that can come up during our shadow work is soul fragmentation. And I am going to do a separate episode on soul fragmentation and soul retrieval. But essentially, soul fragmentation is when a soul goes through an experience that is particularly traumatic, a part of that soul will fragment off to help keep that individual protected throughout this lifetime. And what can happen during your shadow work is that you can become aware of the fact that you have experienced soul fragmentation and then want to work towards inviting those fragments back. So I will do a separate episode on that just to help you understand that process a little bit deeper. Before I get into some general advice in respect of how to work with this aspect, if you are experiencing it, is worth noting here what Carl Jung described as the golden shadow. The golden shadow is parts of ourselves that we have repressed, that are actually gifts and skills that we have brought through with us into this incarnation. So, for example, you may have been an extremely confident, outgoing, extroverted child, and you were then shamed by your parents. You were told that you were a show off and that nobody wanted to hear what you had to say. That confidence and that extroversion and that wanting to be around people may be repressed. And this may actually be something that is in alignment to your soul and going to help you be of service to the collective. So shadow work isn't all about digging into our angers or our guilt or our shame or those parts that we feel really uncomfortable facing. It's also about integrating all parts of ourselves that we have rejected, and oftentimes there are gifts and skills in there. So I just wanted to make a quick note of that because I know sometimes there can be this doom and gloom feeling when shadow work comes up, that it's all about the getting into the hard stuff, and it is, but there's also this aspect of bringing those parts back that are actually going to help you not only feel more soul aligned, but also help you to be of service to the collective. If you feel that you need to do this work with a therapist or with a coach, please do go ahead and work with someone. Shadow work can bring up a lot of stuff, and there should be no shame in asking anybody for help and support while you're going through your spiritual journey. To help you with this, if shadow work is coming up for you, what we have to remember is that this work takes time. I know we live in a quick fix society. We want everything now. We want to do all of our shadow work in one session, but that just isn't how shadow work happens. As I said, we have this spiral. We're going to keep coming around to issues. So please do try and have patience, compassion with yourself during this process. It is going to take time, especially if you're dealing with inner child stuff. It can take time for that inner child, that part of you, to actually trust you again. Okay. There can have been quite a disconnection between yourself and the inner child, and it's very normal for it to take a little bit of time to reestablish that relationship so that that inner child or that inner teen feels safe enough to be able to express what's going on or feel through what needs to be felt through. So do give yourself time. Another thing to know is that because this is stuff that has been stored away, it's been put into the unconscious, you can do certain things to help bring this stuff forward to the conscious. And I'm going to mention a couple of those today. But ultimately, you're not going to be able to avoid the body in this process. Whenever you're working with the lower three primary chakras, it's essential that you have some form of body-based practice in the mix, because we often store the emotions, the energy from these difficult and traumatic situations within the body. So we can't just do all of this with our brain. We also need to employ the body to help us with this process. Practices that can help you connect into the unconscious or the subconscious when you're doing your shadow work are things such as paying attention to your dreams. Your dream state is very connected to the unconscious, and by paying attention to the dreams in respect of themes that are coming up rather than trying to do a full dream interpretation can be really helpful when trying to access this part of yourself. Another practice that can be very supportive during this process is hypnotherapy, essentially bypassing the conscious mind and getting into that unconscious and seeing what is going to come up for you. For some of you, you may find journaling very helpful, especially if you're someone who's very brain dominant, to be able to just take some time out and write down and reflect upon what's coming up for you. And there are shadow work journal prompts that you can use to help stimulate that conversation with yourself. The brain loves to have questions. It wants to be able to answer questions. So you can give yourself certain questions that will help to trigger that investigation work. If you're going to do the journaling, please just remember to always incorporate the body in some way, just so that you're not ignoring that aspect. Really, life is going to present you with all of the opportunities to take the time to sit with this stuff. When an emotion comes up that you are uncomfortable with, like anger, like guilt, and like shame, take some time if you can, either during the time it comes up or later on that day, to ask yourself, have I felt this before? In doing this, you're essentially connecting to that part of you that feels the fear or the anger or the guilt, and sitting with that really uncomfortable feeling and connecting to that part of yourself that experienced that uncomfortable feeling is where this shadow work really takes place. It can be uncomfortable, and this may be where you want to incorporate some practices such as breath work, such as movement, to try and get more comfortable. But the important thing here is to try and use those practices to help you transmute these emotions. So bringing them up into the heart chakra and sending that part of yourself complete unconditional love, rather than trying to bypass, repress, or not feel those emotions. That's the tricky bit, because we can, of course, use all of the spiritual practices and techniques that are out there to bypass if we choose to. And it's very normal when you start really doing this deep work to use them to bypass. If you have, that's okay, that's completely normal. But recognize it and be honest with yourself, and then see it when it's coming up for you. Body-based practices that can help you during this time are yin yoga, restorative yoga, qigong, having massage work done either self-massage or by somebody else. Any practice which is going to help bring your energy and attention into the focus of the body and what the body's experiencing and where the body has stuff stuck is what you're looking for during this time. If you're being called to do this work, we need to focus on the practices that help us to go inwards and to connect to the body, not the up and out into higher consciousness spiritual practices that are out there. The last thing I want to touch upon is helping you to start to see what could potentially be in your golden shadow. And there's two things to look for here. Where are you jealous? Who are you jealous of? Why are you jealous of that person? And equally, where are you judging? And what is it about that person that you're judging? Jealousy and judgment are really good indicators that there's something there that that person or that situation is reflecting back to you that you actually have within you, but you are denying it within yourself. And this can be a really good tool to be able to help you start to see what's hidden in your golden shadow, to then bring it forward and to reintegrate it back into yourself. As I'm sure you can see from our conversation today, this is a huge topic, and of course, it's going to be unique and individual to each of you. But I do hope that today has given you an idea of what this is about, to understand it's a completely normal part of the spiritual journey, and to give yourself patience and grace and kindness if this is something that you are working through, and to not rush the process. Always remember, and I know you've heard me say this before, the soul is never in a rush. The soul knows it's infinite and eternal, and that this human life is just an experience for it to evolve and expand. It's never in a hurry. When you feel that impatience come up and you feel like this should all be done now, that's always the ego talking. I do hope that you have enjoyed today's episode. Remember, if you want to submit a question or a topic for discussion for the podcast, you can do that over on my website. I will leave the link in the show notes below. I am hosting another free Akashic Records workshop, which will be live over on Zoom. And I would love to see you all there. It's going to be taking place at the start of December, and I'll put the link of that into the show notes. That's just an opportunity for you to meet me live and to come and ask me all your questions that you have about the Akashic Records. I hope you all have a beautiful, restful weekend. The nights here are definitely getting darker, and it's definitely the energy of turning inwards and resting. So do take advantage of that. We don't have to be on the go and productive all of the time. So give yourself that time to rest, to just reflect upon everything that has happened to you this year, how much you've grown, and I shall see you all next week for the next episode.